Welcome everybody to this month's Shaker and Spoon Happy Hour. It's great to have you all. And this month we have distinguished guests, the co-authors of the Drinking Like Ladies book, both Kitty Amann and also Misty Kalkofen, who happens to be calling in today from lovely Wisconsin. Pretty excited about it. Our other guest is Lynn House, who is not only a powerhouse in and of herself, but also happens to be one of the cocktail contributors in the book. So we're having her join us as well. And then, of course, if any of you have questions, the right-hand column is the Zoom group chat. And Shaker and Spoon will be seeing that and will message me with anything. And then, of course, there are going to be a couple different segments where we have Q&As, and we'll let you all know that you can submit questions and I can grab those as well. So what I'd really like to do is not have me talk at all, but really we have such an incredible panel today. And I would like to first and foremost introduce Kitty, who is the co-author of Drinking Like Ladies and also is going to be making a drink today that was created by Kelly Thorne, who a lot of you know because she is a Shaker and Spoon alum. She couldn't join us today because actually her restaurant in Atlanta reopened. So it's kind of one of those, it's a bummer she's not here, but I'm very glad that they're doing business and staying very safe, and it's working out quite well. So Kitty, I'm going to hand it to you to talk to us about her cocktail.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I forgot that y'all had sort of met Kelly before, so this is such an incredible honor, and obviously, you know, I have big shoes to fill demoing a drink that's her creation. And we were super excited to work with Kelly. So Kelly is like absolutely a famous bartender. I was Googling her today to get pictures for a presentation and was like, this girl has gotten a lot of press. So if anybody hasn't met Kelly or doesn't know Kelly, in addition to being an amazing person, amazing woman, she's super embedded in the Atlanta bar scene and someone you should definitely check out. So we were thrilled when she agreed to create a drink for us called the Chrysalis for our book. So our book, so we'll talk a little bit more like about the structure and how we ended up with the product that we have, because it evolved over 10 years. But the general broad strokes of our book and the scope of our book is that we wanted to highlight working female bartenders as well as unsung women from history. So what we did, and was so incredible, was we were able to come up with different bullet points and like notes about these incredible unsung women from history. Some from the past and some modern women. And we sent them off to our amazing working female bartenders who came up with drinks. And that's what Kelly did. So she came up with a drink to celebrate a woman called Pushpa Basnat. And we're going to talk about her in a minute. And the drink is called the Chrysalis. So the original drink, we have a few substitutions today because Kelly, and I'll explain all of those to you now as we go through. So Kelly originally created the cocktail with Caña Brava rum, which unfortunately is not being produced anymore. So we were able to procure this wonderful Panamá-Pacific Rum from Jade, right? Is that the name of the producer who sent it to us? So kind.
Yes.
Yeah, Jade. And this is a 3-year-old rum. So it's, hi, Jade. Thank you. It's super cool, super delicious. And the story with this is that it comes from a distillery called Las Cabras Distillery, which is based in Panama and was originally founded in 1919, from what I understand. But over the course of time, fell into disrepair, stopped being used. And in the 90s, there was a group of people that were interested in restoration and interested in exploring, maybe possibly buying and reopening this distillery. And when they started to cut away from the brush and the overgrowth, they discovered that there was a still from 1922 that's still in the distillery. And that's what they're using to make this rum today. So this is a super cool product I hadn't tried before, and I'm thrilled to be working with. We're also subbing out, so in our book, Kelly's drink calls for a product called Quina Leviathan d'Or, which is a Tempest Fusion product. I'm not sure if I'm totally pronouncing that right, but just so you all know, it's a Quina product, and we're subbing in Lillet. So the differences between the two, basically Quina or Quinas, you'll sometimes see them on the shelf called that, are products that were created, they were very, very popular in the early 20th century. They're French aperitif wines, and they're made with a good amount of quinine. And the original point was to get quinine into the bodies of people that were soldiers to help them stave off things like malaria and other disease. Also why we have like tonic and different products like that. So one major point of difference between these two is that a Kina product is going to be like a little bit more bitter, but Lillet is totally delicious, so great substitute. Happy to be working with it today. We're also using the wonderful shaker and spoon chamomile honey syrup. So I hope some of you guys have this from previous boxes. If you don't, you can certainly order it. So Kelly, when she created this drink, she worked with something called Tulsi, which is also known as holy basil. And she mixed it with honey and made a syrup. And the reason is because that she was inspired to use that was because it had therapeutic qualities. So I loved the substitution of this chamomile honey because chamomile also has therapeutic qualities. Probably therapeutic for different reasons, but totally delicious. You'll see. We have fresh lime, of course, which I juiced ahead of time because you don't need to see me juicing. And I had to be a little scrappy with my Scrappy's bitters. I don't have any actual Scrappy's bitters, but this is the benefit of knowing bartenders. You can get them to give you cheater bottles or help you out if you don't have a product on hand. So let's mix. So I'm going to start off with 2 cucumber rounds. And give these a robust muddle in my mixing glass.
Does it have to be robust or can it just be invigorated?
I think it could be just like, yeah, you know, whatever. Robust, invigorated,
Okay.
absolutely.
I just want to make sure that we're doing it. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it correctly over here.
It's only robust if you're wearing your cocktail caftan.
Oh, we haven't talked about my caftan yet.
I'm wearing my
We'll
Paris
talk about that.
shirt. This is what I've got.
Oh,
Nice.
I love that. And then we're going to do 2 ounces of our Panamá-Pacific Rum. Super delish. Next, we'll add our shaker and spoon syrup, 3/4 of an ounce.
For those of you who have the book, you obviously can follow the instructions in there. It actually tells you how to make the honey syrup and, you know, using basil tea. And you can do that as well. And so what a lot of folks we were talking about doing is just do them side by side. You can do what Kitty's doing, which is like the version that's using the shaker and spoon syrups or, you know, just to make your life easier. But you can easily do it side by side with the original recipe and taste them next to each other and see how they turn out.
Yeah, and just check it. Actually, if anybody's doing that, I'd love to hear in the chat like differences. Because I don't have Tulsi honey, I only have what you guys have. We have lime juice, so 3/4 of an ounce also. Nice and easy for me. And then we're going to do 1/2 ounce of Lillet Blanc. Delicious aperitif wine. Last but not least, we have our Scrappy Bitters. Oh, I should mention, Scrappy's is the brand and cardamom-bitters is the product. So, 2 drops of that. Okay, and we'll go ahead and add our ice.
By the way, also for some of you, for those of you who have the book, you'll notice there's a little bit of a typo on this particular cocktail.
Oh no, there is?
Yes, it's instead of saying 1/2 ounce of the Tempus Fugit Kina, it actually says 5 ounces.
No.
So I shot Kelly a note and I was like, I'm pretty sure this is a mistake, but it's your cocktail. And I don't want to, you know, because it's saying yield is 1 cocktail that's a coupe glass. And I was like, how big is your coupe glass? So he's like, yeah, I'm never going to live that one down. So for those of you who actually have the book, it is not 5 ounces. It is.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. That's so embarrassing. We'll have to tell our publisher.
Dear editor.
I know, dear editor. Next we shake. Misty's shake is much better than mine, but I'm going to do my best here. My caftan. Okay, so full disclosure, because I know all of you shaker and spoon folks are real pros. I just moved, and I can't find all of my cocktail glasses. I don't know where my coupes are, so I'm subbing in a vintage little guy right here. I'm not sure what, it's not even like a Nick and Nora, is it? It's just like a small, cute cocktail glass. I would say it's a similar shape as a coupe, but probably closer to like 3 ounces. And I also can't find my super cool fine mesh strainer that I got from an event. So I'm subbing in this little thing that I got in like a tea mug that I've never ever used for tea, but always used for these types of purposes, making cocktails. Okay, so we'll do a little fine mesh strain.
Necessity is the mother of invention, so you're fine.
Yeah, and that's just to keep the cucumber chunks out. I don't mind cucumber chunks, but I want to be respectful of Kelly Thorne's decision to keep chunks out of your life. And you'll see it's a tiny glass.
When you said you were going to do some sort, you're like, well, I don't have all my tools. I totally thought you were going to fork your hand over the top and use that as the strainer. For sure.
Oh, maybe like at the last drink,
Next
you know, like after we've had a few rounds of cocktails. And then my garnish is just a little super cute cucumber round, which is fun. So like even in this tiny glass, like it doesn't like get dwarfed. It looks like super cute. Ooh, give it a little sip. I filled it up nice and full. And it is so refreshing. So the flavor profile, I really feel like the chamomile honey really joins like the cucumber in like a super refreshing way. Like, I don't know about where you guys are all living, but where we are right now, it's like super hot. So this is like the exact kind of drink I feel like you'd want to have on a hot day where you might get aggravated by like having to do normal things. They're super intense and like way more stressful. So very delicious cocktail, super refreshing. I can hold it up.
It was very calming. Can you bring the cocktail itself closer and show it to everybody in your, there we go.
Yay.
Oh, that's nice. That looks good.
Yeah. It's a nice pale.
So Kelly created,
go ahead.
I was going to just talk real quick about the woman that Kelly created the cocktail in honor of, and tell you some of the things that were her inspiration from this woman's story, because for each of the women that contributed to the book, we asked them like if there was particular inspiration as far as the ingredients that you chose or something of that nature, please tell us about it so we can include it. And so the woman Pushpa Basnet that Kelly was creating a cocktail to honor is a woman from Kathmandu, and she's a woman who's still alive and so currently making history, if we can say that, rather than historical. And so she was born and raised in Kathmandu and has always been interested in social work. She actually started a position in the field of social work before she even finished her undergraduate studies. And in that position, she found out that frequently in Nepal, children end up going into jail or prison with their parents if there's no one else in the family who can take care of them. And so you have two lives that are paying for the actions of one because of this. And so she started in 2005 a day program called the Early Childhood Development Center. And she would go daily to pick up the children from the jails and the prisons for this experience. And for some of the children, it was their first time outside of the walls of the jail or prison. And then she actually turned it into a live-in program for about 40 children in 2007. And so her dream was always to open a larger kind of live-in shelter to give this opportunity for children outside of the jails. And so in 2012, she won an award from CNN. She was one of the CNN heroes. And in 2013, Susan Sarandon actually made a documentary about her called Waiting for Mamu. And between the money that she received from CNN and the proceeds from the documentary, she was able to have the funds to build the house that she's always wanted to build called the Butterfly House. And she was slated to open that in the fall of 2015. And there was a huge, I don't know if you remember, but there was a huge earthquake in Nepal in April of 2015, and it destroyed the construction. And so she started from scratch, fundraising and working towards it, and finally opened up the Butterfly House. And so she has been doing that. All of the children live together. The older children take care of the younger children. It's shared chores and all of that nature. The Early Childhood Development Center, the day program, actually was the building that it was housed in, sustained so much damage in 2015, they had to close it. And so her response to that has been, she is trying to actually get that center in each of the jails instead of one location. So it will be spread as a program throughout Nepal, which is super cool. So she's an amazing woman. And Kelly was saying that, you know, all of the children are kind of in this developmental portion of their lives, right? And like a chrysalis, they're kind of changing over this course. And so she wanted to create a cocktail that had elements that were connected to the space in which, connected to the physical location of Nepal, but also be things that were cool and calming for a woman like Pushpa, who might need something, a nice relaxing and cooling and calming cocktail at the end of a day of working with the children. So that's a little bit of history about the woman and the inspiration.
Awesome. And for those of you who saw my screen, I shared it just for a second so that you guys can see what this page looks like out of the book. This is basically just the PDF, so you can see what the book would look like that, as opposed to the left-hand side is going to show the woman who inspired the cocktail creator, and the right-hand side is the actual recipe itself. And like here, you'll see Kelly Thorne, where she is in Atlanta, and then also a brief description of, how she came up with that cocktail. Here, you'll also see the sort of sub-recipe for the Tulsi honey, and then at the yield, so that, again, you can create it on your own, or you can look in the on the right-hand side in the chat, and you can see that we posted the recipe that that Kitty just made here. That allows you to recreate it with different syrups. And it'll all be in the recap as well. There'll be a recap in the private Facebook group, so y'all will be able to see that as well. Kitty, while you're still sipping on that and making everybody jealous, can you come closer to the screen and show us all the little bottles of the things that you used as you refill your glass?
Priorities, Danny.
So here is my shaker and spoon delicious chamomile syrup. It's so yummy. The Panamá-Pacific Rum.
Got you.
Yeah, super excited to learn about that product. I don't have a branded Scrappy's bitters with Scrappy's. We talked about that already. Lillet. So this will always stand out on the shelf. Such a classic, cool ingredient. It's really lovely with champagne cocktail. You're having a prosecco, so it's not champagne.
Or honestly, just on its own in the rocks. For those of you who are picking up something like a Lillet, treat it like you would treat a vermouth and keep it in the fridge. It won't turn as quickly as a vermouth will if you keep it unrefrigerated, but it will last much, much longer. And quite frankly, it's pretty great when it's cold.
It's also the famous Lillet cocktail is the Vesper, right? So some of you guests might have tried a Vesper or heard of the Vesper. Casino Royale is the movie, right?
Right. And that's a great conversation to be had about, because the original recipe was actually quinoa Lillet, which is
one,
right.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it still gives you what you need, except for the fact that I would highly recommend that none of you ever drink the cocktail that Ian Fleming put in the book. It is not that awesome.
Is the build just insane? Are you what? Well, did I say, I don't remember if I said in my conversation about Lillet, I think 86 is when they changed the recipe to take out to make it sweeter, which is probably a longer conversation about changing American palates and what people might have liked more in the 80s versus when a Quina would have been created. If you preferred bitter, people might have preferred more bitter things and been more accustomed to that. But 86 is the year that I found with a brief historical search. So interesting to know.
So for those of you who are searching for it again, in our recap, we will have, Kelly's original recipe in there, and then have the alternatives. The other one is the Moran Quina, which is also a super cool product, but can also be difficult to find, whereas the Lillet is very easy to find for the most part.
Yeah.
I would love to steer this into the two of you talking about the actual book, Drinking Like Ladies, and you guys can have enough time to talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to start, Kitty, or should I?
Either way. I think the conversation about Drinking Like Ladies starts with a little chat about Lupac, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Tell us about Lupac and how you got that going. Well, or should we talk about my pajamas? Because we met when I was wearing pajamas, and that's them again for you.
Kitty and I met many years ago working at a restaurant in Boston called Tremont 647 that every Sunday hosted pajama brunch. And so we worked every Sunday morning wearing pajamas.
Mhm.
I was wearing Supergirl pajamas.
There's no pajama pictures, don't worry.
That's kind of how it all started for us. I, through my dear girlfriend Anne-Marie, she's not in the hospitality industry, but she came across this awesome website of an organization based out of Pittsburgh called LUPEC, Ladies United for the Preservation of Endangered Cocktails. And it was a group of women who for the most part were not in the hospitality industry. Most of them had studied women's history and were very involved in women's causes, but they loved cocktails and they could not find a decent cocktail at that point in time in Pittsburgh. Good to know that that has changed completely. That is not a worry now when you go to Pittsburgh. But when they started the organization, there wasn't really an interest in cocktails. And so they created their own organization, and they would meet once a month. And they capped the membership at 12 so that every member had to host once throughout the year. And when you hosted, you would invite the women over. You would create a party that was based around the story of an amazing historical woman, and the theme for the food, the cocktails, and there would be discussion around this particular woman and her role in history and all of these amazing things. And so they had this great website, and my friend Anne-Marie was like, Misty, I saw this and I thought of you right away. And I emailed them and I was like, is it okay to start a Boston chapter? Can this happen? And they were like, yes, awesome. But they had bylaws, and it included, raising money for women's causes. And I was like, we'll pay total attention to that. So we did everything that they did, capped it at 12, like all of this stuff. And so I invited Kitty and a lot of women who were in the hospitality industry, but some friends also, my friend Erin, who at the time was a water engineer, our friend who worked for Zipcar, Becky, and some friends who were artists. So we had this really amazing group of women. And we started supporting some great causes around Boston, including On the Rise, which is an organization based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, that helps women who are transitioning from experiencing homelessness into secure living situations. It's kind of a day program, if you will. And they help with everything from legal issues, housing issues, all sorts of stuff like that. And also Jane Doe Inc., which is an organization that advocates, how do you describe Jane Doe? It's,
so they do policy work mostly, but they do policy and advocacy for, well, the tagline is like Massachusetts Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Partner Violence. So they do a lot of advocacy.
They do a lot of advocacy. They do a lot of lobbying at the State House. Their office is located right by the State House in Boston. Sorry, I'm on a very noisy street. But they also do things like every domestic violence shelter around Massachusetts can contact them and say, we're in desperate need of this item, or we need help with this, and they help to make that happen. So really cool organization. So that's kind of where it started. So Kitty, do you want to talk about how it transitioned into being a book?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. So at the time, it's just so funny to tell these stories because you never know like what's going to happen. The moral of the story in a way is like, you never know what's going to happen when you meet someone wearing your pajamas. But at the time I was also working in publishing. So I was working in restaurants, but I was working full-time in publishing, either when I met Misty or shortly thereafter. And that was kind of like a big dream of mine. My real dream is to become a writer. The publishing was attractive and interesting to me because I love books. And a good friend of mine who is an editor, who I loved and respected, was like, and she's just a real, when you meet people that have such a cool sense of, visionary thing, right? So she was like, I think Misty had started a blog, so we both co-wrote the blog. We had other people that helped as well, but the focus of the blog, remember blogs? You guys remember blogs? So that was really fun. And we wrote, the format of the blog was to write about unsung women from history and pair their stories with like a cool classic cocktail. So I remember, I think Becky wrote about the first woman who ran the Boston Marathon, but I think she like snuck into the marathon. She's got this like crazy story, like jumped over the ropes and like ran anyway, like I don't know, and got in a lot of trouble. But she paired that with like an aviation, you know. So this was 2007, so classic cocktails were, you know, definitely interesting to us and definitely less known. You know, you couldn't just walk into any bar and say I want aviation and have people like know what you meant. So that was what our blog was, and our friend Danielle Ciotti was like, I think that there's a book here, and we were like, okay. I remember, I don't super remember like the specifics of our early meetings, but I think our early like chats about this were just like, okay. Obviously, I'd love to work on this, but like, really? So I had earlier experience. So if anybody's working in publishing or has worked in publishing, you know, it is like, at least then it was, you know, the labor of love, like that, you know, all the unpaid internships and things like that. So I had done unpaid internships for like years. And during that time, I learned a lot about book proposals, and because I read them. So if you're ever making a book proposal, usually the person who's reading like this gatekeeper is going to be usually someone who's maybe an editorial assistant. At least it was when I was in publishing, which is really interesting. So it's called the flush pile. It's like this whole thing, because we would get hundreds a day, and I would sift through them and look for good ideas and stuff, and for great writing. And then over, you know, I kind of had the lay of the structure of how to write a book proposal. So we worked on that, and you know, I worked closely with Danielle already in a publishing house. She had actually moved to a different publishing house, and she wanted our book to be one of her first acquisitions, and we were so excited. I think we even got an agent before that, because we could talk about, if you have questions about publishing, we can go there. If you don't,
we'll save that for another Zoom.
Yeah. It's not the most interesting thing if you're not into it. But if people are wanting to do that, we can talk about it later. But so we ended up, anyway, long story short, kind of we pitched the book, and Danielle pitched the book, and you know, really went in and lobbied for us, and it was rejected. And it was so.
Well, I think that we should say that this was 2008, right? So yeah. This is all starting in 2007, 2008 is when we finally finished the proposal. Yeah. And just so we're all remembering, like, how can we forget this year? But it's 2020.
Yeah, it's just a different. But it was so, I like to talk about that because there's, like, you know, over the years, like any artist knows this, any writer knows this, any musician, like it's like the field is full of rejection. So, but it's interesting to think about the reason. Like, so I think Misty, in the first case, her editor, I remember her calling me and being like, my editor doesn't get cocktails. And it was she was the editorial director, right? So Danielle was an editor, and the person she reported to, she's like, she doesn't get cocktails. I'm like, that was the reason. No book deals, no reason, you know. She just doesn't get it. She doesn't get cocktails. And then over the course of the years, Danielle eventually went out on her own as a literary agent, and she always championed our book. Like, she would always come back and say, keep, you know, I have faith in your project. I believe in it. And I think I always had faith in it too, although we did get frustrated a lot of times, and I did start to feel like, you know, no one's getting it. Maybe they'll never get it. Like, maybe it's just not a good idea. Like, or I thought it was a good idea, but I don't know. I don't know. But over the years, that's kind of what we got back. We got feedback about, like, we got a lot of, it's so interesting. I was thinking about this earlier. Like, there was a lot of requests to change the book. I remember one iteration, Misty, where we had an editor ask us to make the snippets about the drinks really, really short. So I remember trying to do that and then feeling frustrated. And so I think, I don't know, I think it speaks to like that right place, right time, right person thing. Like, I don't think the book would have been good if we had published it that way.
Did you ever get any requests to change the concept of the book? Like,
yeah.
Who cares about lady bartenders? Like, did you ever get anything obnoxious like that?
I think that the majority of them were just like, we don't understand this. Like, one person said the concept was too niche. Like,
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry, half of the population at least are women. How could that be too niche? You know, like lots of things like that. And I mean, that really fueled us actually when we finally had this opportunity. Like, thank God Kitty didn't give up hope, because she kept checking back on this on this email that we had that I had given up on a long time ago. And just out of the blue, shortly after our current president had been elected and Me Too was happening and all of these things, they reached somebody from our publisher, Quarto, reached out to us and said, our now editor, Jonathan, and was like, did you guys ever, he came across our blog of all things that we hadn't updated in gazillion years, and said, have you guys ever thought about writing a book? And I wanted to be like, fuck you, 10 years ago we thought about it. But, I mean, that shows you it's the right time, right place, but like they wanted it to like be ready immediately, because to really strike while the iron is hot, you know, while everybody is very interested in issues surrounding women in general, not just in our industry, but in general, you know. And so we were just like working furiously, and on my job, I travel a ton in Old Earth. And so I would come home on the weekends and we would do these epic 12-hour days at Kitty's house, right? Just on our two computers, just, and we would like hit this wall at like hour 8, and we'd pull up the old rejection letters and read them, you know, like we'd read them out loud to one another, and I'm like, fuck you, it's not too niche, and we just go back to work for another 6 hours and 2 more bottles of rosé. No, you know.
So 2 things. One, that's a great way for, you know, people who want to get inspired, is reading previous rejection letters after you've already been like accepted and approved somewhere else. That's number one. Number 2, for those of you who are going to watch this video later, you can rewind back to the share screen about 30 seconds ago when both Misty and Kitty were showing their air typing technique, and Misty was like pounding on the keyboards and Kitty was like delicately paddling on the keys. It was pretty funny. Yeah.
I'm definitely a bit more fiery.
So once you guys started working on the book, when was that, and how long did that process take to actually do the full compilation?
So it's been out for almost 3. It's 3 years now. No, 2 years. It's 2 years. 2018. Yeah, and so they contacted us in May 2017. And we had the manuscript in at the end of September.
Oh, okay.
I think we got the contract by May. Yeah, I think there was a negotiation period in February.
Yeah. But we didn't really start writing anything until there was a contract.
Yeah, nonfiction you don't have to. Fiction you have to. Nonfiction you.
And now that you've made your millions as authors, you plan on retiring to which island?
We just work for fun, like just because we believe in it, you know.
Understood.
One of the things that's still super important to us is supporting women's organizations. So, for example, our book launch party in Boston was to benefit Jane Doe Inc. So anybody who came and bought books that day from us, the money, anything over the cost that we paid went to Jane Doe Inc. that day. And so anytime we do an event live where you're purchasing the books directly from us, because any book that you buy from Amazon, it helps us on the numbers with our publisher, but we don't see a cent of that ever. But any event that we're doing where we've purchased the books and we're selling them to you, any dollar that we get in over the cost of the book itself goes to a women's organization. And if it's in Boston, it's usually Jane Doe or On the Rise. If we're traveling and doing an event in another location, we choose an organization in that particular location to contribute to, so that the money stays local from the people that are purchasing it to help women in that community. So that's something that still remains like a core of what we're doing. And it's super, super important to us to constantly be like raising up the women around us however we can.
When you said Jane Doe, I was like, why does it sound familiar? I'm like, oh, because when I bought my first book from you, that's the organization that we were supposed to like, yeah. So That's terrific, and that's not something that you see very often. Anytime there is like a a narrow margin of a way to support these various organizations, like you guys are all over that. I want to open this up to some Q&A from folks who would like to know either about the construct of the book itself, your inspirations apart from the various women who inspired the women who created the cocktails.
That's rosé. We joked for a while that we were going to dedicate the book to rosé because that's what powered us through that summer, and then we realized that our mothers probably deserved it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, you could absolutely. You're like, oh no, the famous poet with the one name, Rosé. He's very, very well known. Yeah.
I love it.
So yes, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat. And then one thing that I wanted to ask you while people are able to, pop some stuff in there is what I think a lot of people don't know is that Boston as a city was, I think anyway, very early in on like the cocktail renaissance. I think people predominantly think about, say, New York, Chicago, San Francisco. Boston was one of those cities that I feel like took a long time, like for people to recognize how important Boston was, not only to the history of cocktails, but specifically about the cocktail renaissance that started around that time, 2007. Actually, I mean, that's when we met, was in 2007. That was like right around the time that like absinthe became legal again in the United States. We're like, talking about laws that are
funny.
Attached to the Pilgrims still. Also Boston related, but
yeah.
Yeah, well, we met at Green Street, right? I still remember the night that we met at Green Street. And I think one of the things,
I love that.
If you talk to Phil Ward, the jerk that he is, he always, he always calls Boston a suburb of New York, right? But there's always this aspect of us kind of being in the shadow, right? Because we're not that far away, and there's not, at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of attention really to go around because not that many people were interested in in cocktails and that renaissance yet. It was really only happening in a couple of places. And so the attention was really drawn to New York, always, 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 and one of the things that I think really put Boston on the map, and I will say, I've said this a gazillion times before, and I'll say it a gazillion times again, is the level of hospitality that you have in Boston. Because those of us who were really interested in the growth of that cocktail movement and attention to kind of detail and style of service in regards to cocktails and presentation and all of that kind of stuff, we all were working together, from the beginning, like when it was like me and John Gertzen and Jackson and Brother Cleve in our kitchens having, monthly meetings and digging into the history of cocktails, that kind of set the stage for us working together in our respective bars and restaurants, So it's still to this day, I remember like working at Drink and having a couple being at the bar and who was in from out of town and they were having a great time, and then they go to check out and they're like, oh, we're going to go to Eastern Standard. And I called Eastern Standard and I said, hey, there's this couple coming over. They're visiting from XYZ place. This is what they've been enjoying here. Can you put their name on the list for 2 seats, And I got a card in the mail from them a few weeks later that was like, no one's ever done something like that for us before. But that was commonplace. People would call me at Green Street for a recipe that was an original of mine because they had a guest at their bar asking for it and they wanted to make it right, rather than being like, what did it taste like? And so that's been something that's really cool, that a recognition by everybody in our community that by working together, we can actually rise faster. And I think without realizing how much that would set us apart from other cities, it really did. So
there is a question here from David Jones who asked, who would you consider to be the queen of the cocktails in the modern cocktail renaissance?
Ooh, Audrey Saunders.
That was by the way, I don't know if you guys noticed, that was a very quick answer.
Is that okay for an answer, Kitty?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that I think that says something that you jumped right into that response.
Yeah.
I always think of Audrey first. Yeah, big time. She's a huge idol of mine, and Julie as well. Julie Reiner, like, yeah.
For those of you who are wondering, actually, it's the timing is rough. This was October was going to be their 10-year. Their 15.
It was more than 10 years.
Yeah, 15 years. I was just like, that was 2010. No, it was 2005. So that would have been their 15-year anniversary, but they unfortunately closed. But she really was the person that pushed the cocktail renaissance into what it is today, even what it was then, much less what it is today. And so many of her bartenders now all own and run their own places. And their same thing, like Misty was just describing, the guest and the hospitality experience are probably the thing that they focus on the most. The drinks are all great also, but it really is all about, the guest and the service. So that actually puts us right into like our next section, which is, this is something that we cover every single happy hour, which is status of the hospitality industry. So last month we discussed, the current plight of bartenders, who's helping, what's impactful, but so much has changed since then, and then changed again 5 minutes later. So what I want to do is, first of all, reintroduce Lynn House from Heaven Hill Distilleries. She is is your official title Director of Education, Lynn?
It got longer.
Oh, really? Okay.
The official title is National Spirit Specialist and Portfolio Mixologist.
Okay. All right.
I love it.
So
January 1st. So yeah.
I want Lynn to be able to speak from the brand perspective, and then also we have Elle Jarvis, who is going to speak to us from the nonprofit perspective. She has an organization called In the Weeds, which is a nonprofit organization championing the health, financial, mental health of the hospitality professional. And so both Misty and Kitty have been asked to be on that board. And I thought it would be a great idea.
And Lynn too. Lynn got asked to.
And Lynn, and Lynn as well. We're a good girl.
I had some technical personal difficulties, but I've been asked as well. So.
She's in the gang. She's in the girl gang.
Okay.
Sure.
In the gang.
So I would love for you guys to, starting with Lynn, if you would talk about in a proactive way, because we hear all the things on the news about places closing, about unemployment, and how hard that's hit the hospitality industry. Can you talk about some folks who are helping? Can you talk about some initiatives that are doing some good, so that our subscribers and Shaker and Spoon fans can learn more about it and possibly get involved?
So as this all evolved, I think it just took us all by storm, and it literally overnight. My boss, who is the owner of Heaven Hill, was like, we just entered into prohibition, where people could no longer do what they wanted to do. I think what was first and foremost amazing, that not only that we did, but so many other companies and distilleries who had the opportunity and the capital to do, was to first start producing hand sanitizer, and dispersing that amongst the community and communities of need, as well as contributing to organizations. And there were all different kinds of organizations to donate to, because suddenly we had millions of people out of work, whether temporarily or permanently, and that was something that we recognized. And so I think in the hospitality industry, it's such a personal industry, and it's such a family-oriented industry, that the groundswell effort was really like, how do we take care of people first? Now everyone's looking at long-term strategies and things like that. So our company continues to, and I know many other companies continue to invest in long-term options for people, because, there's still my beloved restaurant, Blackbird. You and I talked about this, that I worked at before Heaven Hill. just closed, and that was a Chicago institution. Commander's Palace just announced, and Arnaud's and all of that whole institution. So it's still constantly evolving. So I think we're all still trying to figure out how we can help each other best. But being hospitality starts at home. And what I can say is so many different brands, so many different, distributors and such are actually investing a lot of money, particularly in their local communities, to create funds and additional support for people. So that, and there's also been a huge focus on people helping them to develop external skills. Mm. So if you can't come back to your job in the industry, take what you know. And we're seeing more and more programs roll out and evolve, helping people like how you can take these skills that you developed here and turn it into something new, to create, you're looking at longevity, because we don't know what this is. And I just can say it's been tough. I travel 38 weeks out of the year. I've been home for 5.5 months, and I've been told I'll be home for at least another 8 months. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then Al would love to chat about In the Weeds. If you can explain I'd like to learn more about it myself, but if you can explain that to all of our listeners, would be great.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is I'm just so humbled to be part of this. So I've been working on this project In the Weeds for about 3 years, because I was finding my company, Al in the Weeds, traditionally, pre-COVID, consults for very large brands like Marriott, Audi, Boston Beer Company, Truly, on consumer activation and loyalty rewards. And I was finding with these different food festivals and these budgets that a lot of the conversations about what was broken in our industry we're having, but then everyone who could actually impact and make change had to go back to their own weeds and fix dishwashers and the deal with late deliveries and HR issues. So there wasn't really space to have the conversations to fix the problems that we were talking about. We knew it was broken. But we didn't have the time and energy, because we were literally in the weeds as the adults in the industry, to fix it. So I said, okay, food and wine festivals, Charleston, Aspen, Nantucket, they all have to have a nonprofit partner in order to be able to legally sell booze. But their nonprofit partners that they have, some were really thought out very well, and some were a little disjointed. So how do we create a solution to these problems while supporting the people that these large festivals and brands are capitalizing on, and use their budgets to help us in the industry solve problems? And so In the Weeds has just been this ongoing thing that I've been, doing my own company. Right now in COVID, I'm literally frying chickens, another story for another day. And I was just prepared to launch in June of this year. But when restaurants went dark, I said, you know what? Lessons are expensive. Let's not make an expensive lesson right now, and see how the industry reacts to this pandemic and what's actually going to happen. And it's been really interesting to see how some of the bigger brand dollars are coming in and how they're being distributed. So I kind of just flipped it on its head. And so Kitty and Misty and I are part of the Pajama Club. I am an alum of my alma mater, Tremont 647. I had a white bathrobe with pink polka dots that I'm sure somebody wore for years after I left. And so they were a natural fit to bring into the fold. And there's 2 other gals who are really smart. One works with the Four Seasons, and another is a director of operations of Nantucket and Newport Food and Wine. And I kind of put myself under the barrel. I grew up on the beach, so sorry for the surfer terminology, but I put myself under the barrel and said, how do we find tangible, quick solutions to these problems? And what I came out with was products. So In the Weeds is a national nonprofit to champion the physical, financial, and mental health of the hospitality professional, which are 3 buckets that are very greatly overlooked. And so let's talk about finances first, because a lot of hospitality professionals are out of work. What I saw and what I watched burn down in March was to be fixed with GoFundMe. And there's a lot of problems with GoFundMe. It's a platform, and it's the only platform right now for crowdfunding. However, to you or I, we think we give $100 to XYZ crowdfunding, we can write that off from our taxes. We cannot. That's a gift. So additionally, XYZ restaurant or person thinks, oh, this is just free money. At a certain dollar amount, GoFundMe has to issue a 1099, and there's a tax liability. GoFundMe's technology is clunky. You cannot get a human on the phone. And I watched over the course of the last several months, GoFundMe's like holding money ransom almost, because they don't have the infrastructure to like pay it out. So it's like, okay, that's a platform. Let's make a product that fixes that specifically for our industry, whereas there's a hospitality component. So whomever is going through some sort of trauma doesn't have to think about prioritizing bills. We'll take care of all of that for you. If a restaurant is crowdfunding for the whole staff, we will make sure that the restaurateur is not paying a backorder liquor bill or buying a new walk-in, and that money is actually going to the staff.
So this is an all-encompassing solution. It's not just one thing or the other.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
It's a protection. It's protecting the consumer. It's protecting the donor. It's protecting the staff member who is sharing on their own personal Facebook, like, contribute to this restaurant's GoFundMe. And then all of their family members are like, yes, of course. And then it's potentially that restaurateur could be using those funds for something else.
Well, I want to ask you one question. First of all, I can only have, like, the GoFundMe thing. I did not know that. And I can only allow for my mind to be blown once per day. So I have to stop you right there, because I feel like you're going to do it again.
Okay.
So we've even talked about GoFundMe and Venmo on this platform before, because we actually, we always recommend, hey, all, wherever you live, because, we have Shaker and Spoon subscribers in 50 states and all the US territories. And so it's like, if you're able to go to your local bar and support them somehow, check and see if they have a Venmo, or check and see if they have a GoFundMe. So that's really good to know. And one question I'm going to ask you before we have to move on to our next topic is, sure, can you tell us when the Instagram-a-thon is going to be?
Yeah, so it's hard because we can't get sponsorship because the product's not real yet, but we know the product can be real. I have designed this product so, like, brands can, like, sponsor it and, donate to it, and, like, every single touch point of what's wrong with GoFundMe, I have designed this platform to fix all of those things for our industry. Right. So we are doing a gramathon. It's called Behind You, and it is going to be the week of September 21st, and it's going to be very much like a telethon, variety show. People that you didn't know could sing are going to sing. People that you didn't know could shuck oysters are going to shuck oysters. It's going to be hysterical. We're going to make a lot of mistakes because we've never done this before. But we are going to raise money for In the Weeds to get this product up and running in hopes that we can have it launched before, hopefully, I do not hope that restaurants go dark again, but we want this platform up before a crowdfunding situation hits our industry again.
Okay. I put, for those of you who are looking, I put the Instagram, intheweeds.us. That's the handle. I put that in the chat for everybody. And thank you. I really appreciate it. And obviously, if you need to contact her, you can hit her through that Instagram. What I'd like to do is give Lynn the opportunity to make her cocktail for everybody, and also give you a chance to explain about your inspiration on that drink as well. And so this is the second one. I'm going to pop the recipe up while she is chatting about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Donnie and Shaker and Spoon, for having me a part of this. And I have to first and foremost thank Misty and Kitty for inviting me to be a part of this book. It's interesting hearing your backstory because I didn't know how quick you put it together, but I'm so honored that I made your list while drinking rosé. So, and this cocktail is inspired by Catherine Dunham. So she was from Chicago. She African-American woman. Actually, her parents were French Canadian and Caribbean. She was born in 1909, and she was a dancer. Why this cocktail is called La Danseuse, which is French for the dancer. I myself am also part French, so we actually shared a lot as I was diving into her. It was like I kind of got her as my inspiration. I was like, we're both African American. We both are of French descent as well. We both are in the arts. She was from Chicago. I moved to Chicago. I'm actually from Ohio originally. And she was just this amazing trailblazer. She was the first African-American woman to actually attend the University of Chicago. So she was a scholar. She was a dancer. She created the Negro Dance Company. And she was the first African-American woman ever to choreograph for the Metropolitan Opera. So just an crazy trailblazer. So it was great inspiration. And I thought about in the recipe that's in the book, I try to draw from French roots and from Caribbean roots and thinking about her as a woman. So the one thing that we're going to change with the recipe that we made, because we're using the shaker and spoon syrups instead of the infusion as it's listed. The infusion takes PAMA, and I took oranges and allspice and cinnamon and clove and cardamom and let that infuse together. That really was just spices that I had available for me. This cocktail takes its inspiration from a Manhattan. So my favorite boozy, strong, stirred and brown drink in the world. And she was a boozy, brown, strong woman. So this is an adaptation of a Manhattan. What I did to alter this recipe for people at home and to use the shaker and spoon syrups, got a great black pepper syrup, and we've got a really beautiful, these are delicious, an apple cardamom syrup as well. And so just adjusted the recipe. So you have the recipe that's in the book for those who have the book. It only takes about 24 hours to make that infusion. But if you don't have that time and you want to get the syrups, here's what you do. So we're going to take, and I always like to start with the non-alcoholic ingredients first. And this is going to be a stirred cocktail. So I'm just going to take a 1/4 ounce of this beautiful apple, if everyone can see, apple cardamom syrup that's made by shaker and spoon. And then I'm going to take, this was amazing. I love this. I love working with pepper in cocktails, particularly when you're working with brown spirits, because it adds a beautiful, delicate spice. So this is a beautiful black pepper syrup. So I'm doing a 1/2 ounce of the black pepper syrup. Since I'm using the shaker and spoon syrups, I cut back on the whiskey a little bit, just because that whiskey adds a lot of spice. I didn't want the cocktail to be too spicy. So then we're going to take PAMA, which is an all-natural pomegranate liqueur.
Never heard of it. Is it any good?
It's pretty tasty. We're going to do 1 ounce of it. So it's all natural, nothing artificial. I've been representing this brand for 7 years. I'm incredibly proud to do so. Pretty delicious. Donnie, I think you may have a little something to do with it. So
with PAMA? No, nothing at all. I've just liked it since the beginning. For those of you that aren't familiar with Heaven Hill is the longest still family-owned distillery in the U.S., Lynn?
It's the largest.
Oh, okay.
So we are the largest family-owned and distilled distillery in the United States. We've been around since 1935. And we are the second largest producers of American whiskey. So as I said, we're going to go brown and spicy. So we're going to use Elijah Craig, which is one of our flagship bourbons. So this is a bourbon that the youngest barrel in here is 8 years. The oldest barrel is 12 years. It's 94 proof. It's what we call a traditional American mash bill. So it's actually got a fair amount of rye in it. We're just going to add some spiciness and some oiliness to it. So essentially, I just kind of took a Manhattan and flipped it up a little bit and broke it down. And then I'm going to add some ice. So this is a cocktail you want to stir because you don't want it over diluted. You really want the whiskey to sing through it. So I've got it in a nice, if you guys can see, little glass stirring vessel. And I'm just stirring this cocktail. People ask all the time about stirring and techniques. I said it's like a washer machine, up, down, and rotate. So I'm going to stir it so I get a really beautiful chill on top, which we're there. When it's done, you always want to add a little aromatic bitters. This is one of my favorite. This is Regans, Gaz Regan, just icon and great friend, miss him dearly. His orange bitters. And we're going to add that for some aromatics. That just is kind of like the salt and the pepper of the cocktail. And you give it one last stir. And then I love vintage glassware. So I've got a beautiful vintage coupe from the 1920s. I'm going to strain this cocktail in. And as she was a dancer, I've already pre-made my garnish. I've got little orange and kind of cherries dancing together. So all I did was use a channel knife peeler, and I peeled my orange and then skewered it with some cherries and made that. So it's going to add some really nice aromatics to it, really pretty. And then here we have the French dancer, Danseuse, made in honor of Catherine Denham. So cheers.
Cheers to you. By the way, nice back bar at your house.
It's okay.
Not messing around.
Actually really empty right now. I've been home for 5 months.
Why are all these bottles empty? They're now just more decorative than anything else.
I know.
Yeah, that does happen. I'm actually gonna toast to you with that's funny. Look, with the my glass that has become invisible. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. The glass of Prosecco. Today is National Prosecco Day. So although there's not Prosecco in any of our cocktails, there's no reason why you can't just have a glass of it. So cheers to everybody. Raising a glass to La Danseuse, to Lynn, to the ladies. We're not done yet, but I just want to raise a glass and have a toast to you so that you can enjoy your cocktail.
Chin chin. Cheers.
It was funny. I was just thinking about Gary today because I was looking for something, and I noticed that all of the online resellers for Regans Orange Bitters have all corrected the apostrophe in the title. So
really?
for those of you who don't know, Gary Regan or Gaz Regan created these orange bitters, and the one that most of you have now is the 6th iteration. This is number 6.
Right.
And you'll recognize it's during the era when he had his gnarly goat dude beard. But it's his last name was Regan, so it should be Regan apostrophe S, Regans Orange Bitters. But he did it as Regans apostrophe. And I honestly think that he just did it to mess with people. He was a brilliant writer and would often correct me in emails. So, it's fine. But I think that he just did it to piss people off or to see whether or not they would notice. And the funny thing is, if you go to like Total Wine or Bevmo or your local store, they will have corrected and put the apostrophe back behind the N, even though that's not what it is on the bottle.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Okay. So I want to open up for some Q&A for Lynn. So if you have any questions for Lynn, or about her cocktail, about her process, this would be a great time to do that. And then also, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was Heaven Hill is one of those distilleries that is, everybody knows the products and no one knows Heaven Hill, seemingly. Like,
That's very true.
it's like the most popular distillery that nobody knows about.
I
So
say that all the time on the road. when I'm like, who did this? I always go out when I'm on the road and I was like, does anybody know who we are? And they're like, no. And then I start listing the products. They're like, oh, because we're different than most distilleries, particularly in the United States, that the majority of our brands actually don't have the name Heaven Hill on them. So,
what are some of them so that people know?
So from our whiskey portfolio, Evan Williams is our big one. That's actually the second largest selling bourbon in the world. Elijah Craig, Rittenhouse Rye, Henry McKenna, Parker's Heritage, Larceny, those Mellow Corn, those were our big stars in the whiskey portfolio. Brandy, we're Christian Brothers, Sacred Bond. We are Deep Eddy Vodka, Burnett's, we're Blackheart Rum. We are, I'm like trying to think of everything. We are, oh, you got to raise the roof. Hypnotic. We're Hypnotic.
Yeah, there we go. Don't forget.
We're Hypnotic. We're Lindsay Tequila, Tequila.
Launch my nonprofit
Store, Dubonnet. Kitty was talking about Quina, so we make a Quina aperitif.
You do? What's it called?
Dubonnet.
What?
We make
Dubonnet. I love Dubonnet.
Oh, that's funny. Honestly,
Right,
that wasn't even like in my head
where you were and what you were doing.
we make it, and I actually got to help with the reformulation of the recipe. We make Carillons. We just bought Black Velvet, Damier Canton, PAMA. So we have a huge portfolio. We were first and foremost a whiskey house, but we have this tremendous portfolio, and I now represent the entire portfolio around the world. So
wow,
crazy. So
because you've had so much spare time on your hands, I was worried that you weren't busy enough.
I had a ton of spare time. Actually, I mean, it's weird. I have to say, like during COVID, you would think being home, I told people I feel almost more busy home and doing all this online, because I could, here I can be in California, I could be in New York, I can be in 10 different time zones in a day now, and it's like managing that. So, but yeah, it's a huge portfolio, but it's family owned, it's independent. We're based out of Kentucky. We're continually growing. It started with 5 brothers, and now it's a company of about 1,000 people that work for Heaven Hill. So,
if any of you ever end up in Louisville, I would definitely recommend that you do the Evan Williams experience. It's pretty great.
It's so fun. I love it.
and then going to Bardstown as well. It is Bardstown, right?
It's Bardstown, but if you're talking to a local, it's not RDS. It's actually a G. They call it Bardstown. So okay. Just throwing everyone out the local, and we're actually doing a huge renovation there, which is going to be amazing. So there's the bourbon experience that's there, and then there's the Evan Williams experience. It's the Bourbon Heritage in Bardstown and the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience. So they're two really fun, interactive. You get to learn. In Bardstown, there will actually be where you can make your own whiskey, and we're doing a lot of expansion. We've just we're building 3 new rick houses. So right now we're storing approximately about 1.7 million barrels of American whiskey. So
that's it?
Just a little bit.
That's it.
Just the 1.7 million. Okay. Sorry, Misty.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So we're how many months into quarantine land, depending upon where you are?
Month 22.
And loving nightly cocktails, but definitely needing low alcohol cocktails. And I think PAMA is like great for that. So do you have any suggestions around that for those of us who are trying to get away from gigantic gin martinis that might be happening nightly?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I've actually done a couple of IG live segments on this, because I think the first month, we were like, dun, dun, dun. The second, like the 10 faces of Viola Davis, right? And now we're at like this space where we're coming out. And it's like, I have to be responsible. So I'm a huge advocate for low ABV, light drinking, day drinking, responsibly drinking. PAMA's perfect. Super simple. It's just Pomegranate and tonic or Pomegranate and club soda. Really lovely. Today is Prosecco day. PAMA and Prosecco is a lovely brunch cocktail.
So good.
But I will use PAMA a lot as a base, and I love mixing it with sherry. So I'll do like a 50-50 with PAMA and sherry, a little orange in that. And so both of them are low ABV, and it's got flavors like a Manhattan or Boulevardier. So there's some depth and texture, you know, particularly coming from the sherries.
Do you have a preference, Lynn? Like what kind of sherry you use with PAMA?
I like to use a manzanilla, so because it's got a nice nuttiness to it. It's kind of bright. You can also use just a really beautiful white vermouth and do a 50-50 with PAMA and white vermouth. But I've always been a huge fan of PAMA and sherry. But what I actually discovered, so the number one, this is a cool fact about PAMA, and actually a crazy fact about PAMA. The number one spirit in Puerto Rico is PAMA.
What? Really?
Exactly.
That's awesome.
You go to Puerto Rico, there's more PAMA enjoyed compared to like Jack Daniels, Tanqueray, Tito's. It's the number one consumed spirit there.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of PAMA mojitos, or you can lead with that, just add mint and club soda. Don't have to add the rum. But something when I was in Puerto Rico that I discovered that I really loved, if you can find it, like Jumex makes a really beautiful guava juice, or if you have guava nectar in your local markets, I just do like PAMA, a little guava nectar, some fresh lime and club soda on top. And it's a super refreshing cocktail. And I got addicted to them when I was in Puerto Rico.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Listo.
I think you
I always
definitely have some
put a little
takers.
near me. This is guavana, but not guava, but I like it with guava. So.
Got you. That's actually like the guanabana, like the soursop.
Yes.
Like is a really underrated thing for cocktails, but I feel like I almost always have to add club soda because guanabana is so sweet. But it's such an interesting sugar. It's like such an interesting sweetness. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Mary in the chat wrote that she saw a lot of PAMA in San Juan, but didn't know what it was. So now you know. And by the way, what's going to be funny is if you pop on to like the Shaker and Spoon private Facebook group, it's called Let's Drink to That. If you pop in there, in like 2 weeks, all of a sudden it's going to be like people's backyard photos. You're going to see their feet over here, bottle of PAMA over here.
Mm-hmm.
They've just created, it's like bottle of PAMA here, some Hypnotic over here. It's going to be a whole thing.
All I can tell you is if you go on Instagram and you look for like PAMA Puerto Rico, you're going to be blown away.
I'm doing it tonight.
We actually sell more PAMA in Puerto Rico than we do the entire continental USA.
I
Okay,
love it.
I'm going to put this. This is going to be in the recap for everybody, but I'm going to post these here in the chat. So you've got everybody's Instagrams right here. And I included also Heaven Hill Distillery as well. So if you guys want to go check that out. But
I'm Liquid Lady Lynn. I don't know if you have that. So
I do.
I love it.
I've got everybody's got a thing. So except for me, I'm just me. We've got Drinking Like Kids, Misty Mezcal, although she blended Kalkofen in there, which is great. And then Liquid Lady Lynn. So I'm just like D-Ro, like so boring. Unless it's for drinking. Sure. Anyway.
You're probably a lot easier to find than Misty Kalkofen.
Maybe.
I know, you pop right up.
So I want to move on to like our last topic. First and foremost, we have a little bit of a teaser that Misty doesn't even know about yet. But for those of you who are fans of the Red Devil 2.0 kit, Red Devil 2.0 cocktail, oh, you look intrigued.
I am.
We are going to do a fundraiser with Del Maguey to raise money for Another Round, Another Rally, which is another 501c3 nonprofit organization that is giving money directly to hospitality professionals, particularly bartenders who are struggling right now. And so it's going to actually, there's going to be a couple little bonuses in the kit. I can't tell you what's going to be in there yet because it's a little bit of a surprise, But for those of you who are wondering why it has mysteriously vanished from the website, it's because it's going to be coming back soon with a couple of really cool things. And there's going to be some videos that pop up about it, and a bunch of really cool information that is going to sort of seep into your social media world to give you little hints. But that's going to be a very fun one. And Jules made that cocktail actually last time you were on. So that's going to be a fun little partnership that we get to do in order to raise money for another round, another rally. So that's awesome. And then last but not least, we have our trivia for this particular month. Yeah. Hold on a second. Okay, I can do these guys. So Kitty, do you have the questions in front of you?
No.
Okay. All right. Misty, do you have the questions in front of you?
I do.
Fantastic. If you would kindly ask question number 1. Now, before you ask it, again, for those of you who would like to participate, you need to post your answers in the chat. And whoever gets the correct answer first is going to win. This is pretty cool. So the first one is you're going to get all the components needed to recreate Lynn's cocktail. Most of the components to create Lynn's cocktail, which from the book, which is Elijah Craig, PAMA, the shaker and spoon white pepper syrup, the shaker and spoon cardamom-apple-maple syrup. And then the second question, the winner is going to receive most of the components needed to recreate Kelly Thorne's cocktail from the book, which is Panamá-Pacific 3-year shaker and spoon chamomile-honey syrup and Scrappy's cardamom bitters. So there's some very cool prizes. So make sure, I really hope that you guys were paying attention, because you're going to get hit with a question. Go for it.
All right, question number 1. What year did Kitty and I first submit a proposal for the book that would become Drinking Like Ladies?
Oh, bam. Wow.
Wow, so fast.
Okay.
It
looks like, I mean, those all came into the same minute. David's was the first one to come through, but I'm going to let the shaker and spoon team handle that, because it may look different in the chat. So I'm going to let them do it. But that was fast.
Okay.
That was so fast. Wow.
So Kitty, do you now have the questions in front of you?
No.
I have them.
Still don't.
Okay.
I still have them.
All right. So Misty, go for it.
All right. Second question is, what is the name of Susan Sarandon's documentary about Pushpa Basnet?
So that was the woman who inspired Kelly Thorne's cocktail. So it's a little bit of a deeper cut.
Yeah, we talked about her first. Everyone was getting settled in.
Exactly. People hadn't started imbibing yet, so it took a little bit longer for their memories.
Fine. It's fine if you don't remember.
Melissa wrote that she should have joined late. Stephanie, looks like Stephanie got it.
Yeah.
That is correct. Waiting for Manu. That's awesome.
Amazing.
Okay. That was really fun. Thank you guys for doing that. So those were questions that the ladies wrote up for you. And so we will announce the winners and all of the details probably within the next 2 days within the Facebook group. What I'd really love to do now is, if anybody has any further questions for any of our participants, any of our guests, I want to leave that open for anybody now. But for the most part, what I'd really like to do is thank you guys for participating. I mean, I love this book. I feel like I've purchased it for so many people. It's just the drinks are great, the stories are great, and there's so many cocktail books out there that this one really stands out as being one that has a purpose beyond just hey, here's a bunch of cool cocktails out there. If you wanted to use it just as a recipe book, it works that way. If you want to actually read it as a book with stories, you seriously can just go through and learn a lot about all these women who have inspired so many people beyond just the making of a cocktail. So thank you guys for creating that.
Thank you, Donnie.
Thank you.
Jay, I don't know what your full name is, but I just bought Drinking Like Ladies. Thanks for highlighting this book. I'm excited. You are all badass. I love these happy hours.
Oh,
yeah.
we love it too. Thank you, Jay.
And yeah, I for those of you who have seen it on the Shaker and Spoon site and we're lucky enough to get like a signed copy, we're going to try and see if we can do that again, because that was pretty fun. And then also that allows us to buy directly from you guys, which is always a bonus. But it does, you know, it's available. You can go to drinkinglikeladies.com, or you can find them online, a bunch of other online resources. But if you have the ability to get it from the Shaker and Spoon site, that's great, because they actually got paid for that. So that's good. But thank you guys very, very much. One question, do you plan on doing another book?
Yeah.
We hope to. I mean, the truth is, this is something that, and we've talked about it, we could do so many volumes of this, because our industry is amazing. Like, we were highlighting 75 amazing women from around the globe, and we were so fortunate to be able to really have it be a global perspective. If we continue to do that, we could literally do this every year. I mean, we can't literally do it every year, but there are enough women that we could do a project like this yearly and highlight the same number of amazing women. Volume number 1 for us, we brought in a lot of women who had been mentors of ours, but beyond that, we really wanted to highlight women in markets that did not get a lot of attention. Which is why you see our friends from Whitefish Bay, Montana, and smaller markets, because I think that's really important. And we could do that time and time and time again. We just hope that our publisher realizes there's a market for that.
Well, listen, if you start working on it now, we'll have it by 2030, so it's perfect.
That's our track record. We did start a podcast.
Dummy.
You'll get the contract in 2027, and then it'll be done and released and published by 2028. It's perfect.
Oh,
Perfect plan. Let's just start on it now and get everybody excited for it. Interesting. So Vicky posted a question. She's heading to an expat position in Malaysia soon. Any tips for sites and stuff? Oh my God, yes. We have to save that for another time, Vicky, or you can message us directly. There are, depending on where you are in Malaysia and how close you are to Singapore, Singapore alone is a cocktail carnival that will take you a year to get through. It's nuts. Malaysia has fewer spots, but predominantly more because drinking is not as encouraged within the Muslim population. But that being said, there are still some pretty great spots, and you're so close to so many other areas that
I'm aware of that. I realize I'm heading to a Muslim, centric country, but somebody can make a list, because Thailand is there, Singapore is there, quick flights to Hong Kong and other parts of the Southeast Asia. Talking about global women in cocktails industry, I'm excited to explore. This is a new experience for me.
You can message me. I'll actually give you 5 people that you need to go see, starting with 5 women that you need to, you have to go see them when you're in Singapore, and they will just guide the rest of your trip, the rest of your travels. Yeah. And that's just in Singapore. And then Hong Kong, forget about it. That's like you're never coming home, basically, is what I'm saying. Anyway, thank you guys very, very much for joining us today. Both our Shaker and Spoon subscribers and fans, and of course to our fantastic guests. Thank you guys very, very much. It's so great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the support.